Look at any empire, and they will swear their money is safe forever. Listen to any government, and they will insist their promises will never end. But history manages to prove them wrong every single time. From Rome to France, from the American Civil War to modern-day Lebanon, people have woken up one morning to find their savings turned into worthless paper, their salaries melted away, and their futures stolen by the very systems they trusted most. The truth is, what we call collapse isn't a rare event. It is the rule. The real question isn't whether the system will fail, it's how you protect yourself or how you prepare for when that day comes. The most dangerous mistake you can make in finance is falling for the illusion that this system will last forever. We look at our bank accounts, the cash in our pockets, and we assume they are as solid as bedrock. But money is not bedrock. Money is just trust. And that trust can evaporate overnight. That is why history is so brutal, yet so useful. Every collapse leaves behind clues about what protects wealth and what turns into dust. If you look closely, you'll see that those who came out of these disasters with the least damage weren't the ones who blindly trusted the system. The winners were always the ones who doubted first. Let's look at Byzantium, for example. That mighty empire that stood for 1,000 years after Western Rome fell. At the heart of their economy was the solidus, a gold coin so reliable that merchants from Europe to Asia accepted it without question. For centuries, it was the closest thing the world had to a global reserve currency. But here's the part that will really interest our loyal viewers. You'd think they would have learned from Rome's disaster with the silver denarius. You know the story. Emperors mixing tin into the silver until it was worthless. But no. Centuries later, the Byzantines made the exact same mistake with gold. They started playing with the purity, mixing in cheaper metals. At first, no one noticed. But then, trust vanished. That coin, once the backbone of trade, turned into a political lie. And once the money lost its reputation, the Byzantine economy lost its old power. So, who survived? Not the ones trusting paper promises. The merchants who quietly set aside real gold or land that the state couldn't confiscate? They preserved their wealth while everyone else's money melted away. That is timeless lesson number 1. Governments cannot stop the urge to tamper with the value of money. And when they do, real value flees to assets they cannot counterfeit. Of course, not every collapse comes from rulers tinkering with coins. Sometimes a shock comes from out of nowhere. In the 14th century, Europe was shaken by its greatest catastrophe, the Black Death. Half the population was wiped out. Cities emptied, trade stopped. But the economic side of this wasn't just a disaster. Because when half the workers died, labor suddenly became valuable. Survivors could demand higher wages. Land and food, once out of reach, became abundant compared to the number of people. Families with a bit of savings, silver, or just the ability to work gained power they could never have dreamed of. Lands that once cost a fortune could be had for pennies. If this story sounds uncomfortably familiar, it should. We lived through the modern version of this during COVID. Supply chains broke. Governments printed trillions just to keep the wheels turning. The result? Those with money collected assets, while people living paycheck to paycheck were left behind. In America, house prices soared, the stock market broke records, but ordinary people couldn't pay rent. The picture is clear. Pandemics redistribute wealth. It has always been this way. Survivors of the plague used scarcity to climb the social ladder. Survivors of COVID with cash scooped up the assets others were forced to sell. It may not be comforting, but it is the truth. Crises reward those with reserves and punish those without. We've seen how pandemics flip economies, but what about banks? Let's go to Renaissance Florence. Back then, Florence was the financial hub of Europe. There were giant banking families like the Bardi and Peruzzi. These families lent massive amounts to kings, especially to the King of England. When the king didn't pay his debts, what happened? The banks collapsed. Everyone who had money in those banks was ruined. The ordinary citizen who trusted those mighty city banks learned the hard way that size does not mean safety. Do you know what people realized? That the phrase, "too big to fail," is nothing but a lie. Banks exist to make a profit, not to save you. When they fall, they take your savings with them. This story happened with Lehman Brothers in 2008 and in Lebanon in 2019. If you want to survive, never forget this. A promise from an institution is only good as long as things are going well. We usually remember the American Civil War for battles and politics. But in the background, there was a brutal financial war. Both the North and South had to print money like crazy. The North printed greenbacks, paper not backed by gold but by the government's word. Inflation rose, the value dropped. But in the South, the situation was catastrophic. The Confederacy printed so much unbacked money that by the end of the war, inflation reached unimaginable levels. Prices rose thousands of times over. Soldiers' paychecks were worthless before they even reached their pockets. People carried bags of money just to buy a loaf of bread. By 1865, that money was dead. In that collapse, it wasn't paper that held value. It was land, food, gold, real things. While the life savings of ordinary people evaporated into thin air, those holding tangible assets multiplied their wealth. This is a lesson everyone should hear. Even your own country cannot stop the collapse of its currency. In such a case, you are protected not by the paper in your wallet, but by real assets the system cannot print. Let's look at France. Revolutions can destroy money even faster than war. In the 1790s, revolutionaries issued a new paper currency, the assignat. In theory, it was backed by seized church lands. But the government lost control and printed money like mad. Result? Hyperinflation. Farmers refused to accept paper money, demanding goods or silver instead. Bread riots broke out in Paris. The winners in this crisis weren't the ones holding those patriotic paper bills. It was the ones holding things the government couldn't print. Food, gold, property. The lesson came too late for the ordinary citizen. Promises, no matter how fancy, are only worth what others are willing to trade for them. When trust breaks, your savings don't shrink. They vanish. Fast forward 2 centuries to the Asian financial crisis. In 1997, a crisis starting in Thailand engulfed the entire region. Countries borrowed in dollars, trusting their own currencies. But when their currencies collapsed, they couldn't pay their debts. Indonesia, Korea, Malaysia fell like dominoes. Who suffered the most? The big fund managers who started the crisis? No. It was the ordinary citizen whose mortgage doubled, whose job was lost, whose savings melted away. And again, the same picture. Those holding dollars or assets abroad survived. Those trusting local currency went under. What looked like a local crisis was actually a massive transfer of wealth. The rule hasn't changed from Byzantium to Argentina. Borrowing in someone else's money is a death trap. When the storm hits, the creditor doesn't drown. The debtor does. By now, the picture should be clear. Whether it's France, America, or Asia, the script is always the same. Paper money collapses, debt chains people down, and the survivors are never the ones who trusted the system the most, but the ones who saw the cracks before it broke. Do you know what the scariest part is? These aren't just stories from history books. It is happening right now. Between 2019 and 2021, banks in Lebanon did something unthinkable. They locked their doors. People couldn't withdraw their money. Their money turned into stamps inside. A lifetime of labor turned into pocket change. Not just small investors, doctors, engineers, the middle class who trusted the system. They were all wiped out. The lesson was clear. The money in your bank isn't sitting in a treasure chest. That money is just a loan you gave to an institution that can say, "Sorry, I can't pay you back." The moment a crisis hits, the ones who escaped with the least damage were those who kept their money outside the banks, in gold or in real estate. Don't let this sound distant to you. In 2008, banks were bailed out while people in America lost their homes. In 2020, trillions were printed. The rich got richer, the salaried worker stayed in place. In 2023, banks in America collapsed overnight. So the story of "it's safe here, nothing will happen to us" is just a fairy tale you believe, until the door slams in your face. So, how do you protect yourself when everything falls apart? History doesn't give a single recipe. In Byzantium, it was gold. In the plague, it was land. In Florence, it was distrusting banks. In Asia, it was avoiding foreign debt. In Lebanon, it was getting money out of the bank. The method changes, but the logic stays the same. Do not blindly trust paper or institutions. Know what will hold real value when the illusion ends. And here's the paradox that should wake you up. Collapse is both a tragedy and an opportunity. If you are unprepared, it is ruin. But if you are prepared, if you have liquidity or real assets, it is the time to acquire wealth at a bargain price. In crises, wealth changes hands. In 2008, those with cash bought the homes others lost. History shows that protection isn't just playing defense. It is being in a position to buy when everyone else is panicking to sell. But wealth isn't just about what you own. It is about what you can do. The survivors in history weren't just the ones with gold. They were the ones who could create value. The baker baking bread, the craftsman repairing tools, the merchant moving goods. In a crisis, money loses meaning, but production never does. People need to eat, shelter, and live. Those who can meet these needs never stay poor for long. This is the greatest security. Not blind faith in institutions. Not waiting for the government to save you. Real assets, real skills, and the awareness that the illusion can collapse at any moment. Every crisis is a transfer, from the trusting crowds to the prepared few, from paper promises to tangible value. The question is this: when everything falls apart, will you be one of those left holding nothing but promises, or one of those holding something real? History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but if you don't learn from it, it will crush you all the same. If what I've told you just lit a light bulb in your mind, stay tuned. History is full of answers, and I'll show you where to look.